This is Nightly Business Report with Sue Herrera and Bill Griffin.
Strong quarter. American Express surprises investors with a big profit, adding to the number of major companies blowing past earnings expectation.
Rampant robocalling. Lawmakers grill an alleged robocall kingpin about phone scams that cost consumers billions.
Smile. You're being watched. Your face is being analyzed, and it's happening while you're watching your favorite sports team play. Those stories and much more tonight on Nightly Business Report for this Wednesday, April the 18th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Wall Street gains were capped today as investors sent shares of IBM down more than 7%. But late today, the script was flipped. American Express surprised shareholders with a blowout quarter. The company reported a more than 30% rise in profit, easily topping analysts' estimates. Revenue rose double digits thanks to a surge in consumer spending. The CEO said he's pleased with how the company has performed so far this year in the face of mounting competition. Shares of American Express popped in initial after-hours trading.
Therefore, American Express's results could set the tone for trading tomorrow, just as IBM did today, although maybe to the other side. Today, though, the Dow finished lower, down 38 points at 24,748. The Nasdaq added 14. The S&P was up just 2. Now, today's small moves notwithstanding, volatility certainly has returned to the stock market. And the CEO of Goldman Sachs said today that just means the markets are behaving more normally.
Conditions where interest rates are zero, yield curves are flat, there's no risk premium, where central banks all around the world are buying all the risky assets, which then therefore put a damper on volatility and the opportunities to perform, that's not a natural state. We have not reversed all of that, but we're walking that back and walking too. So at the first indications of a withdrawal from what, again, is an unnatural state, guess what? The market becomes a bit more volatility. People get paid, compensated for the risk that they're taking. Our clients are doing better, and consequently, we're doing better with them.
And as volatility increases, some investors are looking for calm in the form of dividends and buybacks. A company's ability to deliver cash in an unsettled environment is important for many shareholders. Christina Hooper is the Chief Global Market Strategist at Invesco, and she joins us now to discuss. I guess, Christina, it just pretty much makes sense. If you can't stomach the volatility, go where there's less volatility and more certainty, right?
Absolutely. And historically, what we've seen is significantly lower volatility from dividend-paying stocks than the overall stock market.
I know you look to a sector like technology for increasing dividends, but, you know, there's been a lot of criticism of a lot of tech companies that they could maybe find a different use for all that cash they have, plowing it back into the company and innovating rather than paying a dividend. What say you?
I say that you need to do both. In fact, those companies, studies have shown, that actually pay a dividend tend to be more careful and thoughtful about their capital investments because they have less to spend. So there's a happy medium where you can pay back some of your earnings to your shareholders and then invest wisely that other portion.
A number of big blue chip companies already, of course, offer dividends, but as earnings come in pretty, so far anyway, on the strong side, do you anticipate that some companies that have not previously paid dividends might begin to do so? And do you have certain sectors that you're targeting?
Well, I expect companies that currently pay dividends to increase their dividend payouts. I think that's going to be the bigger trend, but we should see some companies start to pay dividends as well. The reality is that baby boomers are retiring, and they're looking out on extremely long retirement periods. So the sweet spot for them in terms of investing is income plus capital appreciation, and that's dividend-paying stocks. So I imagine that companies from a wide variety of sectors want to attract that more long-term investor, and so they're going to be much more inclined to pay out higher dividends and in some cases initiate dividends. They certainly are seeing improved earnings, so they can do that.
On that note, Christina, thanks so much. Christina Hooper with Invesco. Bill?
Elsewhere, the Federal Reserve today reported modest to moderate economic activity across the country in its latest Beige Book. That, of course, is an anecdotal look at the economy. But the central bank also noted some widespread concerns Ilan Mui is in Washington for us tonight.
The Federal Reserve releasing its beige book today, with trade and tariff talks showing up in nearly all 12 Federal Reserve districts. Across the country, the Fed found that the manufacturing, agriculture, and transportation industries were particularly concerned about trade. Several districts reported rising prices for steel and aluminum due to the new tariffs. In Philadelphia, 7 of 22 manufacturing companies brought up the tariffs in their comments. And businesses in Cleveland and Virginia said that they're stockpiling materials to guard against higher prices in the future. One architecture firm in Dallas said its clients are worried about moving forward on construction because they're concerned about the cost. In Kansas City and Chicago, there are trade concerns particularly strong in the agriculture industry. On the flip side, however, 2 districts reported seeing at least some benefit from these new tariffs. St. Louis saying that steel and aluminum manufacturers are reopening plants and recalling workers. And in Minneapolis, the mining sector is doing particularly well. Outside of trade, the Fed found that economic activity is continuing to expand at a modest to moderate pace. Labor markets are still tight, wage growth remains generally modest, and inflation is still moderate despite those spikes in steel prices. Overall, the Fed found the outlook remains positive. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Ilan Mui in Washington.
Trade is, of course, a big issue for the economy and also the stock market. Today, that was the focus of a working lunch between President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Reciprocal is the word that I think we have to start using with a lot of nations, not only Japan. So when we say free, that's good. Fair, that's good. But I like to say free, fair, and reciprocal. And the word reciprocal is that when you have a car come in, we charge you a tax. When we have a car go to Japan, which aren't allowed to go there, we have to take down the barriers.
And the president added that Japan is ordering a large number of airplanes from U.S. companies.
A landmark antitrust case is entering a critical phase right now. The CEO of Time Warner took the stand today in the Justice Department's case to block AT&T's $85 billion acquisition of Time Warner, and Wall Street analysts are weighing in. Julia Borston has details for us.
The Department of Justice's suit against AT&T and Time Warner is nearing its culmination. And today, Time Warner CEO Jeff Bewkes took the stand, the highest profile executive to testify yet. Bewkes rejected the DOJ's claims that the merger would be bad for consumers, saying the government's claim that the combined company would gain increased leverage over distribution rivals is, quote, ridiculous. As to concerns that Time Warner would use long blackouts for leverage, Bewkes dismissed them as not in their best interest, saying that doing a blackout, quote, makes no sense to us because they're costly and ultimately would hurt their bottom line. Bewkes also explained the need for the merger because of new competition from internet streaming and targeted digital advertising, saying that the changes to the business are, quote, really bad for TV companies, and that, quote, this combination gives us a good chance to compete effectively in digital advertising and direct-to-consumer distribution. Up next, AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson. He's expected to testify tomorrow, rounding out the core of the media giant's defense. The DOJ, which already rested his case, relied on the testimony of 2 economists who BTIG analyst Rich Greenfield said failed to prove the government theories. And New Street analyst Jonathan Chaplin said before Time Warner rolled out its most high-profile witnesses, he said that unless they made a major error, it would be difficult for the government to win. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
It is time to take a look at some of today's upgrades and downgrades. eBay's shares were upgraded to overweight from underweight over at Morgan Stanley. The analyst cites eBay's shift towards its own payment system and its move away from PayPal. The price target was raised to $58. The stock rose nearly 3% to $41.75. Norwegian Cruise Line saw its rating raised to buy from hold over at Deutsche Bank. The analyst there cites the likely initiation of a dividend and the anticipated appointment of a new CFO. The price target, $66. The stock was up nearly 3% to $55.43. And coverage of U.S. Steel was initiated with a sell rating over at UBS. The analyst cites a possible fall in prices and a structural decline in steel demand. The price target is $30. The stock closed at $37.50.
Coming up, investigators zero in on what may have caused that Southwest airline engine to blow apart.
If you couldn't pay your taxes yesterday because the IRS website went down, you can now. The website is back up and running. And because of the glitch yesterday, the deadline to file was extended to midnight tonight. The House is scheduled to vote on a bipartisan bill today, making major changes to that agency, including giving taxpayers new rights and protections.
As we reported yesterday, Starbucks is going to close its 8,000 stores here in the U.S. for one afternoon in May to conduct employee anti-racial bias training. One estimate puts the cost of that for the company at about $12 million in lost revenue. According to MarketWatch, that's about 20% of their daily revenue.
Investigators are now zeroing in on what caused a deadly engine failure on a Southwest flight that had to make an emergency landing in Philadelphia. The focus is on whether a fan blade in that engine broke due to metal fatigue. Phil LeBeau has more now on the engine and the questions about whether others should be inspected again before they take off.
Just hours after a Southwest Airlines plane was forced to land because its engine exploded, investigators quickly figured out what went wrong.
One of the fan blades, the number 13 fan blade, was separated and missing.
There are signs the engine's fan blade may have suffered from metal fatigue, allowing it to snap off in flight, creating shrapnel that shot out of the engine and blew out a window. 43-year-old Jennifer Reardon died after a frantic fight by other passengers to keep her from being sucked out of the plane.
When we saw the window was gone, somebody saw the lady out the window, so just tried to get her back in.
These two wonderful men, the MT and a passenger, they managed to get her back inside the plane, and we lay her down and we started CPR.
Passengers say the plane plunged almost 15,000 feet as the pilots stabilized it after depressurization.
I do want to thank and commend our flight crew for their swift action and for safely landing the aircraft.
The CFM engine, built by GE and a partner firm out of France, is the world's most popular airplane engine, flown by more than 300 airlines. 2 years ago, another Southwest flight had a similar engine failure, which now raises the question, is there a systemic issue with the CM56 engine? Following this most recent incident, Southwest is accelerating engine inspections. Other airlines are also stepping up their plans to inspect their CFM56 engines. Meanwhile, investigators and regulators in Washington are increasingly facing the question, is this engine safe? Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Market volatility helps results at Morgan Stanley, and that's where we begin tonight's Market Focus. The Wall Street firm repeated what we have been hearing from other banks this quarter, namely that investors made changes to their portfolios more often, and that helped send trading revenues higher. Overall, results topped expectations, but Morgan Stanley did say that performance for the rest of the year may lose some steam if geopolitical tensions and trade conflicts remain at the forefront of investor concern. Shares, though, were up a tick today to $53.26. Textron said that rising demand for its jets helped results top expectations. The company also reaffirmed its outlook for the year and said that it plans to sell its tools and test equipment business to Emerson Electric for more than $800 million. Shares rose nearly 7% today to $63.99. And a day after Tesla said that it was going to suspend production of its Model 3 vehicle for a week to fix manufacturing bottlenecks, now the automaker said today it's aiming to make 6,000 Model 3s a week by the end of June. And to hit that ambitious target, Tesla said that its assembly plant will soon be running 24/7. Shares were higher by nearly 2% to $293.35. Sue?
Bill Wynn Resorts has added 3 new faces to its board. Elaine Wynn, the casino operator's largest shareholder and the ex-wife of the former CEO Steve Wynn, has been pushing to add new directors in an effort to restore the company's reputation as regulators investigate allegations of sexual misconduct against her former husband. The two settled a 6-year legal fight earlier this week. Shares of Wynn finished up 1% to $192.91. And after the bell, aluminum products maker Alcoa said it is seeing demand strengthen following the Trump administration's tariffs on imported metals. Both earnings and revenue were ahead of estimates. The company also raised its profit forecast for the year. The shares were initially higher in after hours. They ended the regular session up 4% to $59.40. And Amazon revealed for the first time the number of Prime members. In a letter to shareholders, the company says it has 100 million paid Prime members globally. The news sent shares higher in initial after-hours trading.
Robocalls. We all get them, and we seem to be getting a lot more of them. So the Senate Commerce Committee is looking into this issue, and today members heard testimony from, among others, a Florida man who allegedly made almost 100 million robocalls over a 3-month period, and he denied any wrongdoing.
The extent of my activities have been significantly overstated. I'm not the kingpin of robocalling that is alleged.
In June, the FCC called Adrian Abramovich the perpetrator of one of the largest and most dangerous illegal robocalling campaigns ever investigated. He was fined $120 million as a result. It is a fine that he is fighting. So why are there so many robocalls, and what is being done to rein them in? Joining us tonight, Herb Weisbaum. He's a consumer expert with consumerman.com. Herb, thanks for joining us tonight.
Very welcome.
My question is, I mean, they wouldn't make these calls if they weren't making money doing it. How much money are we talking about, do you think?
Absolutely. There are two reasons why robocalls still happen. They work and they make a lot of money. No one is really tracking the losses. I called the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission today, and they don't have numbers. The best number I can give you is one put together by Consumers Union, and they say that people in America lost $350 million last year and every year to telemarketing telephone scams. A vast majority of that is probably starting with a robocall. So we're talking about probably hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And remember, most people don't report the scam, so it's probably significantly higher than that.
And it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but to follow up on what Bill was saying, obviously they're making money on it. And is that why it seems that we're getting exponentially more robocalls?
Well, there's a number. Every robocall is not bad and every robocall is not illegal. About 60% of the robocalls are perfectly legal, and sometimes things we want. I want to know if my plane is delayed. I want to know if my prescription is ready at the pharmacy. Political calls and there are a lot of political robocalls and charitable robocalls are all legal to landline telephones. But yes, the reason why we're getting so many is that the technology makes it so easy for the bad guys to use these things, the scammers or companies that aren't following the rules. Some big companies recently have been fined for this, and they work. People do respond to them. Right. They get a call that says it's the IRS calling, you owe us money, and they actually pay the money when the IRS doesn't make telephone calls. So yeah, we have to get a whole lot smarter and not fall for these things.
So what's the government trying to do about all this Senate committee hearing and so forth? I mean, we can block the calls, but why can't they stop the calls from coming?
Well, we can't even block the calls in every case. Just today, a bill was introduced in Congress called the RoboCop Act, which would try to help the situation. Remember, the phone companies started out by saying they couldn't block these calls at all. The Federal Communications Commission said, yes, you can. Then they fought doing it, and now their technology to do it. I have a service called Nomo Robo, introduced in 2013. It blocks all the robocalls on my VoIP, my internet telephone that I have at home. I have an app on my cell phone. It blocks those apps, but there's nothing for landline phones. And the landline companies have made it very clear to me they're not about to do what is necessary to block these calls because they're switching over to computer technology and don't want to invest in the old copper lines. Congress or the FCC, someone is going to have to force them to do something. That's what this RoboCop Act would do.
That is for sure. Herb, thanks for joining us tonight again. Appreciate it.
Very welcome.
Herb Weisbaum with consumerman.com.
Coming up, time is money, but so is data, especially data about your face.
Puerto Rico has suffered another island-wide power outage. This blackout comes nearly 7 months after Hurricane Maria destroyed much of the island's electrical grid and infrastructure. The outage is being attributed to a line failure at its largest power plant. It's estimated the power will be restored in 24 to 36 hours. The Army Corps of Engineers has spent more than $2 billion on restoring power since the hurricane.
112 years ago today, the Great Quake hit San Francisco, devastating that city. While technological advances have made the city's buildings stronger, some experts worry the new skyscrapers might not hold up in the event of another catastrophic earthquake. Aditi Roy has more.
San Francisco's skyline is moving up. 7 out of the 10 tallest buildings in San Francisco were built in the last decade because real estate in the city is limited. So as tech companies like Salesforce expand, they're building vertically. But with 8 fault lines cutting through the Bay Area, some earthquake experts worry the explosion of tall buildings could make the city more unsafe during a catastrophic quake.
There are a number of very credible studies that suggest that the collapse of a high-rise building is possible.
Earthquake experts like Professor Keith Porter from the University of Colorado say a big quake in the Bay Area will likely happen during our lifetimes. That rattles the nerves of people like Justin Pratt, who works at Salesforce.
It's a pretty scary concept. I mean, doesn't necessarily keep me up at night, but it's something that's always kind of in the back of your mind.
It's happened before. The Great Quake of 1906 killed more than 3,000 people and destroyed 28,000 buildings. This newly discovered footage of the devastation following the quake shows rubble lining main arteries like Market Street.
It's a costly solution. There are unknowns. I mean, we don't really know precisely probability of collapse for new buildings. It's very difficult to estimate without an awful lot of data.
Porter says older buildings, or those built before 1994, the year of Southern California's Northridge quake, are more insecure. He adds it is possible to make them safer, but that would also make them more expensive.
With fairly modest investment in higher cost of construction, we can make them safer, stronger, better able to resist big earthquakes.
The city's current building code allows for a remote chance that a building could collapse during a catastrophic quake, while Porter says it is possible to make the city's current skyscrapers more earthquake safe. It's impossible to make them completely earthquake proof. Officials with the city's building inspection unit tell us that engineering is not a perfect science and that these buildings are being built as well as modern engineering permits. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Aditi Roy, San Francisco.
Facebook is bringing its controversial facial recognition technology to Europe now. The company yesterday said that it's rolling out that feature in compliance with a strict new EU data law. But it's not just Facebook that's getting into this type of data. It's happening everywhere, even at sporting events. Eric Chemi explains.
Data collection for advertising isn't just happening on the internet. It's happening when you walk into your favorite sporting event. The next time you walk through that turnstile, it's likely your photo will be taken and used to sell an ad back to you. It's all fair game. The fine print on the back of your ticket has a disclaimer saying they have the right to use your photo. High-res photos are now snapping away, capturing shots of every person in every seat nearly every minute. It starts with technology advancements, high-resolution cameras, facial recognition software, fast data analytics, almost unlimited storage. All these factors have let several data companies get into the business, turning your photo into profits. The main goal? How much data can they extract from your face? FanCam is one of these up-and-coming firms. It started originally as a fan engagement tool. Other companies began more on the security side, but now much of the photo analysis has morphed into making money. Data analytics helps teams sell more ads and figure out who is sitting in which seat. The algorithms can quickly give overall demographics for an entire stadium worth of fans.
Gender of their fans, the age of their fans, how do different days of the week or start times affect those numbers? And then being able to go back and say, how do we optimize and create a better fan experience? That's really what we're all about right now on the data side. It's about being problem solvers.
FanCam sells this data to teams who use that to sell more effective sponsorships.
We're also taking a number of pictures that aren't published. And some of those are to help teams solve problems. They have problems in many different respects, and some of those are just being able to tell an accurate and credible narrative to their fans and business partners.
For example, one team might know they have more young women coming to games on Tuesday nights. That data could affect what ads appear on the Jumbotron that day or what music gets played between innings. While the data is being used for these big picture decisions, individual privacy is still a sensitive subject.
There's always a notion of privacy. Well, legally, we can absolutely take images. The purposes of those images are, again, for anonymized data extraction.
Be on the lookout for the growth of this business going forward. And the next time you're at a game, don't forget to smile. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eric Chemi.
Here's another look at the day on Wall Street. The Dow finished the session down 38 points. The Nasdaq added 14, and the S&P 500 rose 2.
We leave you tonight with a look at the life of First Lady Barbara Bush. As you know, she passed away yesterday at the age of 92. This matriarch of a Republican dynasty was known as being both tough and loving and for having a sense of humor. Her husband of 73 years was at her side when she passed. Her son, George W. Bush, called it the end of a beautiful life. And granddaughter Jenna Bush Hager wrote that her grandmother taught her to use her voice, but also to value the opinions of others. She, of course, was only the second woman in American history to have a husband and a son elected president of the United States. What a great lady.
She will be fondly remembered.
Absolutely.
That is Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.